Welcome to the Beyond Membership podcast, where we are uncovering what drives associations forward and how the suite of Momentive software products accelerates that momentum. Well, Rob, we're back again. Anything interesting going on with you lately?
Well, I would say that there's certainly something interesting going on here at Momentive in particular. Proudly announced this week we acquired VolunteerMatters. That's the third acquisition we've had this year. The first being Blue Sky that we've renamed to Path LMS, and then we picked up the Microsoft Dynamics 365 AMS provider Cobalt, and now VolunteerMatters, which is probably a product that some of the people in the industry are a little less familiar with, but it just really has terrific capabilities for organizations that, depend on volunteers. Think about, United Way or G. Komen Foundation or organizations like that. They're just so driven by volunteers, and this solution is set up specifically to support that kind of thing. And so, of course, we're excited to bring that into our portfolio. Our systems like NetForum and Nimble and all the AMSs certainly have capabilities to manage volunteers, and it takes care of a lot of our clients, but this takes it to a whole nother level. So if it's the type of organization that they're all about volunteers, then it might be the kind of tool that they could add to their system and just really be able to support that part of the business even more. So anyway, that's, exciting news.
Yeah, I mean, the acquisitions are definitely keeping life interesting. I've been digging in with Cobalt myself and learning and meeting some of the team and learning more about what they sort of things they have going on over there. So pretty exciting times.
Well, obviously our goal is to try and make sure that we have a solution that meets every need. Really, if we could get to a point where either we build or buy something that fits all the main business requirements that our association nonprofits have, that's when we would know we're delivering kind of the promise that we put in front of ourselves. And this just is another step. It fills one of those holes that we felt like we had. So it's a nice step forward.
All right. And as usual, we are in great company. We are joined by Carrie Lennon from the American Orthopedic Association. Carrie, it's nice to have you.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you both for inviting me to join you today.
Welcome, Carrie.
So kind of ceremoniously, we like to ask our guests, something interesting about themselves. So what do you got for us today?
All right. I was debating between a couple, but I think hopefully you consider this interesting. So even though I have worked in the, technology IT space for 12 years now, my undergrad degree is in history with a minor in Irish studies. So as you can see, I am putting both to very good use. When you are a millennial who graduates in 2008 at the height of the recession, your job prospects and where you go from there become a little interesting. And I think, like a lot of association professionals, I have an interesting background and I made my way in associations and I ended up in technology, but I still love history. All of my podcasts, except this one, all of my other podcasts that I listen to are history-based, the History Chicks, What You Missed in History Class, all the, books I read, shows I watch, etc. I try to keep, my passion and love for history alive, even if in my day job, that's not what I get to do right now.
Now, did you get a chance to go to Ireland during your studies?
I haven't actually been to Ireland, if you can believe it. I've been to Scotland. I have been to England numerous times. My father has Irish citizenship, but somehow I have not made it to Ireland. I can Irish dance for you if you'd like. I did that growing up, but no, I haven't made it there, which is really kind of sad. But I am planning a trip next year for my big 40 birthday, and I hope to make that a Ireland and England trip next year.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah,
exciting. Mm-hmm. So I imagine your heritage maybe is what got you interested in Irish history?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, my dad, I don't know if you're that familiar with Chicago, but my dad is Southside Irish, grew up in Beverly on the South Side. I have a very large Irish Catholic family. He's first generation, so very big on being an Irish American.
So you were part of the fun throwing the green dye in the Chicago River and enjoying all that celebration?
So, that's the downtown Irish parade, or St. Patrick's Day parade. There's also the South Side Irish parade.
Ah.
That one is better. But I have actually marched in the downtown parade before. So that has, checked that one off my list. But the South Side parade is where the real Irish people go. The one downtown is a little touristy, or gets a little crazy as well. But both are good.
Carrie, my path was a little similar to yours, and mine was a little more towards political science. Got my master's in that, but came out, same thing, looked in the newspaper. There was like this many jobs for what I thought I was studying for and this many jobs in IT.
Yep.
And so had to do the pivot and learn something new. And like you, it probably changed your whole career. So the great thing about something like history is it teaches you how to write and to think and be creative. And as we're moving into this world of AI, I think that those skills are going to become even more and more valuable. So Jake will obviously tell us that the IT folks will still remain the most important, but I think that some folks with these other skills are going to become pretty important.
Yeah, I would agree. I think I think important as AI is becoming and will become, I think there still has to be that human interaction or that human component to make sure that what AI is, producing for you is accurate, is not biased, there's a lot of, I still think, human intervention that will need to be a part of AI in the future as we continue to grow with it.
Absolutely.
So, Carrie, when we were chatting before, one of the things that really piqued my interest with your background is you had said you have worked with NetForum, with Aptify, with Personify, with Fontiva, with IMAS. Yes. I am not sure I've met anyone other than maybe an industry consultant who's touched them, but actually worked with 5 of the kind of the premier AMS solutions on the market. How did you end up being in a situation where you were working with so many different ones?
Well, maybe I'm a bit of a job hopper, but I think it's just because my first association that I started working at, they were on IMAS. They were on one of the old version, the desktop versions that you had to like remote desktop into. And while I was there, that's when we moved to NetForum. So that was sort of the time where I was bridging IMAS and NetForum for the first time. Then I worked at another association where they were also on IMAS, a newer version, and I was on the more web-based version of IMAS for almost 3 years. I was in Personify. Admittedly, I think I was only at that position for about 10 months, but I did work in Personify daily. They also had a nice integration with Salesforce, so I was sort of in Salesforce proper and Personify while I was there. And then Aptify, I worked at Aptify when, community brands became in existence. So I was actually working as a business analyst, implementation consultant for Aptify. So that's how I was working in Aptify, which I think Aptify and NetForum they're very similar. So I sort of took all the skills that I had knowing NetForum so well and parlay them a little bit into Aptify. And I was, there for a year and a half maybe. So, I was in the platform, implementing the platform, helping customers use it to its full extent with Aptify. So that's how I've seen all the big hitters. And then with Fontiva, that was where I'm at currently. I came in, that's the platform that they were using. It wasn't working well for them. It was a situation where I just think it wasn't implemented that well. And we, went forward trying to find a new solution. And now it's landed me back in NetForum.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So when we were chatting, you talked a little bit about some of the challenges with that. I think everybody, probably all of the people who listen to this podcast would think of AMS implementations and kind of shudder for a moment because of how much consternation there is amongst folks that work for associations and changing these systems. I think you had to deal with a healthy amount of fear, right, when you were dealing with that?
Yeah, it's hard. You come into a situation where these folks have just been through a pretty difficult implementation, right? And the idea, I think, to them of not only going through the process of going through the implementation itself, but then I think there was a bit of a fear of, now I've got to learn another new tool. We just went from one to another, and now you're wanting to move us to another AMS platform. So that was difficult to come into. I think you have to learn to manage expectations and to also look towards the future with people. Make sure they understand, well, what are we dealing with? How is it ever going to get better? Is it going to be worth it in the long run to deal with, the additional work, the additional project of going through the implementation? Yes, it's going to be, extra work on your already very full plates. But if at the end of the rainbow, if so to speak, it's going to put us in a better place where we're going to be more efficient, we can improve processes, is it going to be worth it ultimately? And I think staff understood that where we were at that moment in time on the Fontiva platform wasn't sustainable. And so we had no other choice. And I think they understood that, and it helped a little bit getting people on board and having the implementation and the whole process just go, I think, about as well as I think an AMS implementation can go. I think it went incredibly well, incredibly smooth. But it's not ever an easy thing, and it wasn't my first, AMS implementation. And I don't know how many more in the future I want to do. I mean, they're big undertakings. It's not fun, but it's needed, right? It needs to happen.
Yeah, so drilling just a little bit deeper, I'm sure some of our listeners may be in a situation where they are not satisfied where they are, and there's that process by which you got to convince them that it is time to change. Were there certain things like outcomes that you try to describe, or were there measures you put in place to show them that when they come out the other end that they're going to be in a better place? How did you go about convincing them that even though they were tired, this was going to be better for them to make the move?
Yeah, I think ultimately, our RFP process sort of spoke for itself. We had, I think, a far more robust RFP than happened the last time an AMS was selected. I think we went from, and I say we, meaning I wasn't there for that implementation, but they had maybe 20 requirements on their RFP, and we went to well over 100. And so I think and I also compared all of the ones we were looking at to our current platform. It was saying yes, no, right there next to each other. And I laid that out for people. And then that compounded with the idea that a lot of our customizations we had previously built had broken somewhere along the line in the last 3 years because of an upgrade broke something, and we didn't really have, whether it was the resources or the energy, quite frankly, to try to go back and fix it. And so many of these processes had now been taken outside of our AMS, and we were kind of Band-Aid fixing them with JotForm, which works great, but all that data is outside of your AMS, right? And so also showing them that, hey, all these things we are now having to handle outside of our platform, we will be able to do once again in our platform. All that data is going to be there where you need it, and you're not going to have to worry about an upgrade breaking something and you having to come up with a workaround in a few months or a few years. And I think that really spoke to people.
So Jake, I'm sure when she mentioned the word upgrade, it probably caught your attention a little bit. I know that when your work building Nimble, upgrade is such a critical thing, and I know it is for all of our platforms. I mean, what are some of the strategies that you try and make sure that we are putting in place to make sure upgrades go successfully?
Yeah, that is such a deep topic. So for some level of awareness, I suppose, my background is really in helping. Primarily, I worked for Nimble before they were acquired by community brands, Nimble AMS, and a big part of what I did there was make the upgrade successful. And some of the original story to that was we started building automated tests. When we had roughly 10 customers in the early days, we started building these automated tests that went beyond our unit tests. Unit tests are more tightly confined test methodology, where the tests we started building were integration level tests. It was a test that simulated a person using the software. That was key. It was crucial to being able to scale those upgrades out to the 5-6 times a year we were doing it. So testing is really the biggest thing, and reducing the manual testing that you're doing as much as possible by having those automations in place. And then there's a philosophy as well that goes into how you consider designing something. In particular, you're doing implementations for every customer, and every customer is an association. They want to do things in their particular way, and they have certain outcomes that they're looking for that are distinct. Well, they have a similar business model. They also have very distinct things that they want to achieve. And so you have to approach those customizations with a particular philosophy of, how do I make this scalable? Then you need all of the kind of infrastructure around that, with documentation and just awareness amongst the organization of what you may have customized or how you might have customized it. And then how you design the actual software going forward, how you add features to core Nimble AMS, which every customer will get with those upgrades, is another aspect. So you have to pay attention to all of those things. And then obviously you are going to break things from time to time. And so you need to be ready to fix those things in a timely manner. All those things together has made it so that for us, upgrades are, for most of our customers, the upgrades are really an afterthought. One other kind of final thing to say about that is test environment or staging to production. So having a preview period is really what I'm getting at. And the preview period is a time when there is a perfect copy of your customer production orgs, and you ship the latest versions that you have to that org. This is really talking about Salesforce. You could think of any environment, right? Any customer environment, you should have a test and a staging and a dev. And you're able to deliver the upgrade to those environments where there's no risk, but you have the opportunity to truly evaluate how that change is going to do in a live environment. And taking your time with that, giving yourself enough time to find problems there and adjust to those problems is another crucial step. And the more you can automate that, the better, right? Because then you're going to get early signals.
Right, right. Carrie mentioned the RFP just a few moments ago, and I would certainly recommend to our listeners that the part of that RFP process should be really having the vendor describe what their upgrade process is. Because I think that for people who may not understand, it is such a critical element to the long-term return on investment. If you're having to pay your vendor $25,000 or $50,000 every year just to do an upgrade, or you have to take processes offline for months and months on end, these are all big costs they're kind of hidden. They're that part of the iceberg that you don't really understand when you're thinking about the cost of an AMS, and so the fact that it sounds like Carrie and her organization put out a great RFP, I would say part of what would make an RFP good is having some real pointed questions on how that's being handled. Carrie, I'm assuming that was something you knew to evaluate. Were there other things that maybe are fly under the radar that you're thinking, well, I knew we needed to check on this, that, and the other thing?
I think it was important to understand the customer base. I think what's really great about NetForum is it's been around a long time, right? And it has that really active user group. And is the RFP necessarily the right place for that? I'm not sure, but I think it's great to also have sort of a third-party area, if you will, where you can go and you have this great group of people, 200 plus customers, a lot of users in there. And it's, they're on like a higher logic platform. You can pop in there and you can ask your questions. And sometimes it is someone from Momentive answering it. Sometimes it's just another tech lead at another association who's got 20 years of experience. And those quarterly meetings, I'm on every single one of those. There's lunch and learns. They've got their own users group meeting as well, or like conference, I should say. Yep. And I think that's great. I know Fontiva had something, it was a smaller thing, but I just feel like people are in there complaining about this broke, what's going on. I don't understand what we have to do with these X, Y, and Z before this upgrade. I'm not getting it. It wasn't the same type of mentality that I feel like I get with the NetForum user group. And I just love having it. I think it's a great resource. And I also think getting to understand what it's going to be like when you transition to support. Because support was an area that was really lacking for us. And I know it could be different for every company, but with the AOA, we're a very small organization. We have 17 staff members, and I'm the only person that sits in any sort of tech, or IT job. And I'm not a developer. Can I noodle with SQL? Yes, I can. But, I'm not a developer. And so I do rely on, our support if something, is completely broken, or if I can't figure out what's going on X, Y, here or there, we do. And it's really nice to know what are your expectations when you transition to support? Are you going to have a dedicated person? How long will it take for something to get responded to? What are the different levels, of severity? All those things are very important. What's covered under support, what's not, anything like that. Think a little bit further in the future than just your immediate implementation, because all of that's going to be important once you go live.
So when you were going through the selection process, Did you actually ask for, like, obviously you asked for demos on the products, but did you then ask for like a meeting with the various companies you were picking, maybe their implementation teams or their support teams, so you could evaluate that in the process? And would you recommend that?
So what we did is, so we had a few things. So we obviously did like our demos. We asked for 3 references that we could reach out to so we could speak to clients. And I understand references can be, they're only going to give us the good ones, right? But it is sometimes nice just to talk to someone and you can get candid with them. They might give you some information that maybe you weren't expecting. But then also we had kind of a set of questions, and I had a few questions from every team. We're a little bit more specific. Some of them are a little technical, and that actually went off. I don't know exactly who Howard sent it to, but I know those were sent off to people more in like whether it was R&D or engineering or wherever it was, because it required a little bit more of a technical background to answer some of those questions. And we were able to flesh out a few more things that you weren't necessarily going to get just on your sales pitch. But I also think having such a specific RFP also helped the demo. They were able to, I think, craft it a little bit more specifically to us. And if we needed something specific, you know, we have a pretty big fundraising arm of our organization, and she was interested in knowing, like, what does the add-on look like? We were able to speak with Rebecca Veerhouse and get some additional information. And so I think it's important to, if you don't feel like you've gotten all the information from your salesperson, because they're going to tell you what they think you want to hear, I think you should reach out and ask to talk to other people at the organization. And if they're afraid to let you talk to anyone else, maybe that's a red flag. And when we were looking at, you know, NetForum, it was just, of course, I'll get that for you. I can have X, Y, and Z answer that for you. It was, you know, always able to answer any question we threw at them. It just seemed like they were totally transparent about everything.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like it could be a good path to raising some red flags there. I think Rob had a little chuckle about that, but it's kind of true, right? At the end of the day.
At the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you should ask those hard questions. Mm-hmm. I think that when an organization goes through a selection process, there should be obviously demos that have scripts, like show us how you're going to, you know, run our business in your software. And it sounds like you did exactly that.
We did, yeah.
But I think that if you, in addition to that, you should ask to meet with, you know, people who might be implementing your software. And they might say, listen, we can't guarantee these particular people, but you should get a representative sample and you should be able to ask them questions. Mm-hmm. And I think the same thing goes for support. You should say, okay, when we're all done, we'd like to maybe meet some of the team or at least have them respond to some of our questions, because as I like to tell people that when you're buying an AMS, it's like getting married, because you know you're really hoping for a multi-decade relationship. Obviously, some of us who get married even want that to be longer, but let's at least get to multi-decade first, right? And then we'll go to hopefully on to plan more. So that means that the phase of the implementation in the life of the relationship is actually a very small piece.
Right. Exactly.
So you spoke a lot about having this really robust RFP. In situations where the product couldn't meet your RFP, do you have thoughts around that? Like customizing versus changing, right?
Yep.
Like, what do you think?
So when we went into this, we were definitely under kind of the mindset of, instead of changing the platform to meet our, you know, processes, let's change our processes to align with baseline as much as we can.
You're warming my heart.
Well, and you know, for me, it was having me on staff. I mean, not to say like I'm so amazing, but they had not had a business analyst on staff before. And so I think I do say different things. I do come from a different way of thinking than someone who's just, I'm the membership person and they've also made me do the AMS implementation, right? And so I think with Fontiva, it had been over customized. You know, our third-party support for them were saying we were the most customized instance of Fontiva that they were supporting at that point, right? And
so that may very well might not have been their fault. Could have been your fault.
And we were customizing these things where I'm like, this is like, what, 2 hours of someone's work, like once a month maybe? And we spent, like, where was the ROI? I mean, we were just customizing things just to customize them at some point. And I was It was silly, right? And that was not what we wanted to do going forward. We do have some very particular processes. To join the AOA, you have to be nominated to be a member. It's just not a normal join process. And we do have organizational memberships and individuals. So we knew we had to customize certain things, but we were okay with saying, no, we are not going to customize that. That didn't work before. There's no need to. We'll either find a workaround or we can handle it outside and we'll just put the data in iWeb. We made those concessions and it's really worked out well. I think we've only customized what we feel we truly need to, where the business needs are there, because if we didn't, it would be a time suck for someone. And we don't want that, obviously. So we've definitely changed our completely way we look at things. And I think about that even going forward. We obviously did phase 1 of implementation, but we've continually been doing more things ever since February of 2020. It's not stopping, but people will come to me and say, oh, well, what about customizing the awards process? And then I'll look and I'll see, we get like 40 award submissions a year, that's it. You can just put those into iWeb app. You know what I mean? Like there's certain, you just have to kind of consider and not over customize. And I think we've done a much better job at that now if we're just being conscious about it and actually thinking it through.
Yeah. I like how you put it in terms of ROI. The any customization is development effort. Mm-hmm. One thing that one thing that isn't quite apparent usually as well is that you're going to build some software. This is essentially what you're doing. Yep. 80% of the cost of that software is going to come after you actually go live with it. It's all going to be maintenance. It's always going to be problems in the future. And so you will really want to make sure that you're taking out a cost that is actually going to pay off. Mm-hmm. 40 award submissions a year, probably not the place to be focused, right?
Exactly. But, I think we've done some great customizations where we've just almost finished up one for abstract submissions, which was something we looked at. We could do a one-time kind of larger chunk of money, but that made more sense than spending $6,000 every year, year after year after year, that would never end with, an outside platform. So to take the kind of initial hit and know we weren't going to have that, big of a number ever again really made sense. And to have that in that forum so we could eventually roll it into A score, stuff like that. I mean, there are a lot of perks of having your data, obviously, in your AMS than outside of it, whenever possible.
Jake, when you hear the word customization, I have a feeling that also is something that piques your interest. I assume when you're thinking customization, Jake, you are always trying to redirect people to do things kind of point and click as opposed to actually writing code. Like, what's your approach to minimize what I would actually call true coding types of things?
Yeah, well, there's one kind of philosophy that I picked up really early on in my career, which was the best programmers solve problems without writing code. And I think that same philosophy is applicable here, right? You really should try not to revert back to that. Let's write some code to solve this problem. Mm-hmm. There's so many kind of more issues that come with that. So yeah, absolutely, clicks over code. That's kind of a Salesforce principle. And I think is another kind of philosophy that you can apply elsewhere. It's hard if your application doesn't have the opportunities
some kind
to
of
click.
toolkit or something. Yep.
Right, but as best you can, right? You should try and I like how Carrie put it. Align to what's there. Oftentimes, a change to your business process or just being honest about what the AMS can do for you in any given circumstance is going to help you avoid those customizations.
Yeah.
And those are just risks. Those are just risks going forward whenever you have them.
And I think it opens up the conversation to have internally. Well, we've been doing a process this way for 10 years. Do we need to keep doing it that way, or why have we been doing it that way? I think sometimes people just want to keep doing things a certain way because that's how it's always been done. But that doesn't mean it's the best way or the way that should continue. So I do actually think aligning with baseline opens up a lot more conversations to be had internally, and it's a good thing.
One of the things that I've seen where we've kind of changed our implementation model is we've moved more towards trying to onboard somebody early with their data so they can really see it before they make decisions on how they want to maybe change or configure the system. And we're finding through that process, they're actually finding, baseline actually does do what I need it to do, and so I don't need to configure it or customize it. And that's helping us shorten our implementations. And I'm sure there's other things, Jake, that you think that people could do to not back themselves into a corner with a whole bunch of changes to the software.
Yeah, I mean, certainly. You said the word onboarding. I think that's a little bit more of what you would maybe think of like with less overhead. Oftentimes we say implementation, right, in the association space, but onboarding is kind of more of a standard software world concept. I'm guessing associations also think about that a lot for their members, right? Onboarding members. They're probably thinking about that, and whenever you have like a web asset out there and you're trying to attract members, like the one thing you're trying to think about is reduce friction. You want to reduce the friction of that member having to give you more information. I talk about this all the time with event registration with Nimble AMS, and my team is probably sick and tired of hearing me talk about it. But anything you do to slow down getting to that point where the member is ready to become a part of that organization, or that member is ready to attend that event, what can you have them do after they've committed, right? What can you have them come back and fill out after they've paid for the ticket to the event, after they've paid for the membership and they have their membership card? How can you, it's the same kind of concept for associations. What can they do later? How can they get in quicker? How can they phase their implementation or phase their onboarding process? Or I guess the right way to say that is, how can they move the onboarding process to phase 1? And phase out that implementation over the coming years. And maybe they find that phase 3, phase 4 have a lot of things in there that after they started using the software for a while, they actually don't need.
And I would, and Jake, you're dipping into a whole different topic, but that I'm going to just comment on slightly, which is that if you ultimately do decide you want to spend money on configuring or customizing your system, I feel strongly that for our industry, put that money into, as you're saying, making the member journey as easy as possible. And because the staff can be trained to work a certain way, you're not training your members. So the software has to be as easy and frictionless as possible. And I'm curious, Carrie, when you were trying to make some of those decisions, did some of that come into play?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I should say, I think a lot of kind of the customizations that we've done have been eWeb focused, right? They've been trying to make the experience better for our members and our users, not necessarily making things that much prettier in iWeb. It's been very heavy on eWeb. And that was definitely top of mind because I think we made things very difficult for our members previously. I used to say, like, why are we making it so difficult just to give us money? Like, it shouldn't be this hard for them to make a donation. It shouldn't, there was a lot of friction for our members and they would get frustrated. They would, we don't need that. And so that's really been where we've been doing our customizations. And I want to say we're kind of like refining baseline processes. How can we take the baseline event registration and just make it a little bit better for us? Like, we don't need this area. We don't need this field. It's just making these tweaks to baseline so it's easier for our customers, or it's implementing an add-on so people can donate better. But it's so true. We just want to make their experience better and easier because these are orthopedic surgeons. They don't have time to try to make a donation 5 times because they're getting an error. It should be as simple as possible.
Carrie, you've given a lot of great advice on this. Is there any other biggies that stick out to you that you think our listeners would be interested in? Like, if they were getting ready to embark on this journey now, is there like anything else that you think that you would want to recommend to them?
The only thing that pops into my mind, and I think this is more once you've chosen a platform, I think what was really great for us is that the training on Net Forums started for our team on like day 1 of having access, to our Net Forum instance. We didn't wait to, we're going to go live in 3 weeks, time for training. We had kind of discovery training where our business analysts did very high level training of all the different modules. And then people had access immediately. They could go into the test environment and muck around all they wanted. And that really helped because they were almost simultaneously using Fontiva and Netform at the same time for like 9 months. So by the time we went live, that kind of learning curve almost did not exist because they'd had 9 months to get used to it. And so I was really expecting like, oh, I'm going to be inundated with, how do I do this? I need your help. And it didn't happen because they were just learning for so long. And I think that pre-training and then that kind of a little bit more, in-depth go live, pre-go live training, and we recorded everything and just we're really big on SOPs. I try to drive people to, just make an SOP of every single one of your processes. So if you leave, if you get hit by a bus, someone else knows how to do it. I think all of that has helped. The learning curve, honestly, was almost not there, which was amazing to me. So I think that's great. Just make sure you are getting people in there and playing around immediately so they know what they're doing when they got to move to their new system.
Do you have any like special plans for that? Did you like surveys, or did you kind of stand over their shoulder and say, click the buttons?
Bring food to events?
No, but so, like for the training, like I made sure I invited like the appropriate people, and, if most of them did come, and if they weren't there, then they were expected to watch, the recording of the training. And there was, I think we did a good job we sort of had a core team for our implementation onboarding efforts for the first, phase of it. And I think we did a good job of including a very nice group of people. I think with with Fontiva, some people felt like they weren't included with the implementation, and so some things were missed. So I made sure we had a broader group of individuals, and so those people were involved in almost every single discovery meeting, every configuration meeting. We had a very robust configuration workbook. I made people be involved in this project. They probably were getting sick of me, but I needed them to, and they needed to be. And whether they will ever admit it, but I think it made their lives so much easier once we went live and, everything was turned off in Fontiva, and they didn't have that kind of crutch to lean back on to say, oh, well, what was going on over here? Yeah, I didn't force anyone's hand, no, but people were good. They definitely did what they needed to do.
Yeah, well, it seems like it paid off. Mm-hmm. That seems like that was a wise choice.
Yeah, I think so.
All right. Well, Carrie, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. It's been a really, really great conversation. And,
thank you so much.
That's been another episode of the Beyond Membership podcast.